Sure.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Mindverse. We are glad that you were able to find the time for visiting today's webinar. I'm Radhika Nagpal, founder of Nirveg, a mental health organization aimed at achieving equity in access to mental health care. We collectively work with underprivileged communities and psychologists by creating awareness, imparting trainings, and short term courses. Through the Mindverse series, we collaborate with leading figures in the mental health space and connect them with budding psychologists to further equip them with skills and knowledge needed to traverse their careers. Our latest initiative, the Mental Health Bootcamp, a training come internship certificate program for mental health professionals, is now open for applications. And if you wish to know more about it, please visit the link in the chat box, which I have shared. We're very happy to have you all with us today for our eighth session, LGBTQ and Affirmative Counseling. Please know that we'll conduct a short Q&A at the end of the session. So if you have any questions during the webinar, please keep them with you and we will address them during the Q&A. Before I further introduce the topic, I would like to welcome our speaker, Ms. Ruchika Kanwal. She is the founder of Anamika Ru Therapy Care. She is a licensed clinical and child psychologist registered as an RCI, a relationship expert, a corporate and posh expert, an EAP provider, and an LGBTQIA affirmative therapist, along with being a clinical psychology mentor and trainer. We are honored and excited to have you here with us, Ruchika, today. The topic for today is really interesting, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Radhika, for having me here. I am super excited to talk about something that's so integral and has been so integral in my journey as a clinical psychologist.
So our audience today majorly comprises of budding psychologists, followed by patients and caregivers, and of course, mental health enthusiasts. So let's just start with a simple introduction to LGBTQ affirmative counseling from you, Ruchika.
Sure.
What are the post the introduction, maybe you could highlight what are the main issues faced by them and why there is a need for LGBTQ affirmative counseling.
Absolutely. I think living and working in a world that's not always friendly and often discriminatory does not have to mean a life lived in shadows. In fact, many people in being part of minority, not just based on gender or sexuality, but also race and ability, and others are striving against experiences of prejudice, oppression, and discrimination. Yet there are a lot of them who come out and who want to speak about the issues that they are going through, and there's so much of resilience and courage that we see in them, and they
Absolutely.
often come out and want to talk about issues that they are facing. And believe me, their issues are not just about this oppression and discrimination, but also the everyday issues that any other person from any other gender background experiences. They have relationship issues, they have career issues, they have family issues. So a lot of us, and when we say us, I'm talking about the psychology fraternity, we feel that their issues will only be about their gender or how it's a struggle to come out. But no, they're just any other people, and we can't just stereotype their issues to be based on just their orientation or their coming out, or the family is accepting or not accepting their orientation. They're also about relationship, they're about, like I said, career, about where do they want to get in life, about college applications where they're not getting through. So I think that's first thing that we need to keep in mind, that it's not always correct to stereotype them. Of course, having said that, they do have added issues of these prejudice and stereotypes that we subject them to. We is the normative society who, or the heterosexual society that put them through that you are different and you have a problem.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So, according to you, what is LGBTQ affirmative therapy, and how do you think being an LGBTQ affirmative therapist, in your experience, has helped them?
So when we talk about, even before I get into the LGBTQIA affirmative therapy, let's just understand what affirmative therapy means. And affirmative therapy is where we are constantly acknowledging that there are these issues that the community or people with disability or people with different race or caste have to go through, and we as therapists are not taking a neutral stance towards it. So we are
Right.
affirming that yes, we agree that you're going through something that you shouldn't have to go through. When we add LGBTQIA affirmative therapy, it means that there's a therapeutic approach that holds a positive view of clients who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer, which acknowledges and rectifies the negative messages of homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, and heterosexism, and which the people from the community have to go through. Another name to LGBTQIA affirmative therapy is also called gender affirmative therapy, which is the same. It's
Right.
a form of
Mm.
counseling or psychotherapy which seeks to help people to come to a consensual, comfortable, self accepting place with their gender. It's founded on the position that no gender identity, expression, or experience is any more valid, natural, or normal than any other. So we don't call heterosexuals normal and people from the community going through something different or abnormal. You know,
Right.
everybody have a right to express and to identify the way they want to, and to acknowledge that their gender orientation or their gender identity is not a choice they're making. We are not choosing to be heterosexual. So why do we want to use that
Absolutely.
label for people from the community that you're choosing to be lesbian or choosing to be gay?
And I
And
think,
another, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, and I think that it by itself adds a lot of added pressure that it's not a choice, but they end up feeling that it is a choice we have to make, whether it's in terms of coming out or being by themselves open and accepting to it.
Right. And I think added to it is also the fact that you can change a person's sexual orientation. Believe me, in my 8 years of this journey I've had, and a lot of parents, and I'm totally up, I would totally agree that this trend is changing. I have lesser
Hmm.
parents coming in now, but there was a time when parents would come and tell us that, change my daughter's way of talking or way of dressing, make her look more like a girl. She should use feminine language and not this. And it has taken so much to explain that, can
Hmm.
I ask you that tomorrow you become a guy and you start dressing up like a boy, do not wear sari and suit, do not use all the makeup that you're using. And if you cannot do it, I can't ask your child to do it. And then we became the worst kind of
Absolutely.
therapists. But that's always a challenge you'll have. You'll probably 10 million people might not like you because you're out there affirming that you are standing by the community and you believe that there's nothing abnormal in them, you know, and that's a label we
Right.
all want to use. And sexual orientation is something that cannot be changed. It's a matter of personal identification. And the easiest example, when I am training and teaching students and youths, and if I call you Neha when you say your name is Radhika, it's the same way. I can't label you whether you are bisexual,
Absolutely.
lesbian, heterosexual just because of your sexual behavior. And a lot of people also confuse between sexual preference and sexual orientation.
Yes.
It's not interchangeable. Sexual preference is could totally be that, I identify as a lesbian, and because of whatever reason I'm choosing to marry um, a man, doesn't change my orientation to bisexual or to being, or heterosexual. I can still very well choose to identify, not choose, I still identify as a lesbian, and sexual preference and sexual orientation are very different. It's not a choice. Sexual orientation is not a choice. Preference could be a choice. Who I end
Absolutely.
up romantically being with or end up in my sexual encounters with could totally be my choice, but orientation is not a choice and it can't be changed.
Right. And I think that is a really critical difference that everyone should know about. So, as you also said, historically, also many in the LGBTQIA community who have sought mental health services have found counselors and therapists sometimes uneducated about issues around sexuality, gender, and identity. And unfortunately, this has often resulted in them ending their treatment prematurely or never actually continuing the treatment and seeking the support that they need. And in some cases, the clients end up being the one, they end up having the owners to try and educate their therapists that these are the struggles we are facing and they are valid and I need help with it. So, how much has the scenario changed now, according to you?
I think, Radhika, it's very important to be a counseling, to be somebody who's counseling the LGBTQ youths. To be honest, it's challenging, especially if you belong to the heteronormative section,
Absolutely.
because growing up, we've all felt, and I do agree that initially we would also feel very conscious, not because we didn't want to talk to them, but it was just that we didn't know what to say, how to address them, and that would just keep a lot of allies, not very open or not very outgoing or not very communicative with people from the community. But I think gradually, when we've all made ourselves aware, we've all made ourselves more, it's very basic things like what kind of gender pronouns we want to use. Just ask the other person, hey, how would you like me to address you? It's as simple as that. That's how my journey started in therapy. I started asking people that, what's your gender? I've had heterosexuals community looking at me and be like, can't you see? You know, and it would just push us back that where are we going wrong?
Yeah,
But I think I'd rather take that than calling somebody his, her,
definitely.
without having to ask them. If you're confused, if you don't want to ask, just address them as them, you know,
Absolutely.
which is the which is easier. But I still
Mhm.
feel that that's just the beginning. Once you start interacting, when you start reading up more, it's not difficult. And people from the
Right.
community feel that, uh, the heteronormative society are arrogant. But a lot of times I sit with them as well and explain that, it's often they don't want to say the wrong thing. And so they're just
Yeah.
equally scared to come out and talk
Mhm.
to you and open up with you. So I think it has to be an effort from both the sides,
Yeah.
if you consider that as two sides here. So starting there, it makes a difference. Just ask a person, what is your preferred pronoun? How can
Pronouns.
I address you? We have made mistakes. My clients have been lovely people who have told me that, no, Ruchika, you cannot call her her. You know, even it's easy to just call
Yeah.
somebody's partner her, and you apologize and you tell them that I'm sorry. But yeah, I think a lot of clients have been quite helpful in this journey, and I do see that if they see you make an effort, they're more accepting of how you speak to them. But of course, like I said, now when we train people who want to be queer affirmative therapists, it's best that even before you start seeing clients from the community, you educate yourself first.
Absolutely.
There are courses, there are formative counseling courses. The one that I have heard the most about is the one by the Mariwala Health Initiative. It's a
Mm.
6-class course, not very expensive, and they'll teach you all the basic skills you need to just start seeing clients. And of course, with constant supervision with queer affirmative therapists, you can constantly learn and brush your skills. But even before that, Radhika, I think it's very important that as a person, as a psychologist, what do I really feel about the community?
Mhm.
We've all come from families where there have been these hush hush conversations. I remember
Yes.
my mom, when I had to tell her the first time I was attending a pride march, that do not get your pictures clicked. And I was like, I will, because I don't, it's nothing, I'm not doing something wrong here, and I want you to
Absolutely.
accept what I want to do and what
Mhm.
I want to do for the community. So I think having those conversations begin with friends, start at home,
Right.
see what you feel about it, and that's when you then get on to reading more articles and attending the certificate courses. In our time there were no such courses, even in the
Yes.
education system. It's so difficult to have these conversations. I remember
Yes.
in MPhil, we were told to just skip chapters
Mhm.
on, on um, gender identity disorders and dysphoria, and we were never trained and taught. It was all that we had to read and go through and do our own kind of research to understand. So I think partially it's also about educating the youth at an earlier age and not expecting them to
Absolutely.
learn it later, because
Mhm.
like I said, I think um, the right age at which um, I have seen with my clients, the age at which they start exploring their gender identity is mostly around adolescence. And if we
Yes.
don't teach kids at that age, most of my clients have gone through such an enormous amount of bullying for
Right.
being feminine, for being tomboyish, for dressing up or having hairstyles the way they wanted to. And it has just made so much difference in these people's life, how they are accepted at an earlier
Mhm.
age, what kind of language we need to use for them at an earlier age. I think these are little things that make a difference.
And I think it's crucial to realize, considering that most of mental health issues arise, when we are young, at least in India. So, if in the formative years itself there is something which is affecting you a lot, it will take a long time to heal from it, of course. And as
Absolutely.
you said, the best way to be allies is to first start the conversation at home with your family members, with your friends. I mean, we don't need to, often people ask that what can we do to be allies? What can we do to support? So there isn't something really big needed from anyone. It is just you need to continue having conversations so it gets normalized.
It's very important with our peer groups, with our colleagues, with budding psychologists. It's very essential to have these conversations. And a lot of times, Radhika, in fact, I've heard people say that, students ask me in the training that I don't belong to the community, so I can't be their therapist. And I ask them why. What makes it so different here? So it
Hmm.
doesn't mean that you have to belong to the community to be queer affirmative. It might
Right.
be that their preference is that, which is
Hmm.
understandable, but you don't
Absolutely.
have to constantly alienate them or yourselves. We all have to
Right.
work together into it, and the lesser we create these differences, the easier it would be for everybody to work together.
Absolutely. So, moving on, since we know that this field is still a little far from mainstream in India, can you shed some light on the scope of specifically LGBTQ affirmative therapy in India and also its scope?
I think a lot of people from the community or from the heterosexual community have started to understand this need, and even the straight allies want to have the conversation, where there's so much of awareness about um, trans visibility, with the
Hmm.
bills and the constant back and forth around is same sex marriage allowed, not allowed, with media focusing a lot on
Hmm.
how we accept people from across the line and across the communities. I think people have started to open up more, and regardless of what they identify themselves as, it has been. I see that even people from the heterosexual community do want to go to queer affirmative therapists because they want to know how to speak to a friend better. They want to know how to
Hmm.
speak to their colleagues better.
Right.
So even though their problem could be any problem that a non-queer affirmative therapist can also deal with, but it's just that okay, this person has a niche, they understand what it is, and I want to learn more. So okay, I'll go to this informed person.
Hmm.
So a lot of times
Hmm.
we see that whether or not you belong to the community as a client, you want to go to a person who's most aware of what's happening,
Right.
and that's the reason I feel it's something that should be made as a curriculum in higher education in fields of masters
Absolutely.
and MPhil, rather than people having to study it, alag se, have to go and register
Right.
and do it. I would have loved to have this as part of my subjects in
Mhm.
my education. So that's a place we are hoping for.
Mhm.
But we can't just leave it on that okay, if the college is
Right.
not teaching, it's not something important. And I think media has played a significant role in contributing to how people view a queer affirmative therapist. In fact, affirmative therapist,
Yeah.
we've had supervisions, we've discussed with our mentors that what political stance do we take when there are things
Mhm.
happening in our country with the whole Shaheen Bagh thing happening. I think I've allowed clients to cancel without any cancellation charges if they want to go and sit out in the protest, that I want you to stand by them if that's what you believe in.
Definitely.
um so it's just about taking a stance. I think we were taught 8 years back that you have to be very neutral, but
Mhm.
I think over time we have realized that you as a therapist also need to have an opinion, because your clients look up to you to have opinion as well.
Absolutely. And they can, I mean, they can of course have differing opinions or the same opinions as you, but if it's perfectly normal to, stand up to your opinion and they stand up to yours. And I mean, I also believe that is how it should be.
Absolutely. I think it's easy to tell them that, I've heard your opinion and I'm afraid my opinion is different from yours, but I
Right.
can assure you that will not change the dynamics
Mhm.
of our relationship and therapy. Rather than just saying that I won't want to share it.
Mhm.
Because we were
Right.
told that if somebody asks you in a session, your orientation, you can't answer. And I was like, why? Why can't I let them know that,
Yes.
okay, I'm straight, but I'm an ally. I And now I've started to say I'm an affirmative therapist, which means that whether or not my gender orientation matches yours, I totally understand where you're coming from and I totally accept you. And I want to give you that space to accept yourself completely.
Right. That was a lovely part I think we covered. So how did you decide to, as you said that in your course itself, they skipped these topics. So how did you decide to pursue in this direction? That you wanted to be more knowledgeable and identify right now as a queer affirmative therapist?
I think I would wholeheartedly give the credit to the previous organization that I was working, which is India is one of the first centers to start queer affirmative therapy. Um, and That's Karma Center for Counselling and Wellbeing. It's placed in Delhi. And my founder and my colleague pushed me to attend, webinars and workshops
Mhm.
to gain more knowledge. And she would just tell me, Ruchika, just go out there and learn this because this is important. So I think a lot of credit goes to her for that. And that's where my journey started. And for us, it has been attending workshops and, learning more, reading articles, hearing podcasts to help ourselves understand what it means to be okay in meeting clients and having a conversation and apologizing if you make a mistake in those sessions.
That's great. And how has your journey been so far in these last 8 years?
Overall, it's been great. I started with working with a psychiatrist, and soon I realized that I do not want to just see clients from the clinical background. I want to explore more avenues, and I
Mhm.
started to get more and more projects in corporate. And sexual harassment has been my a very close area of work. So I've been working with corporates as an external member for POSH complaints, that's prevention of sexual harassment at workplace. And along with that, I worked with children because the more we talk, the more we realize that we need to have more, intense mental health conversations with children.
Right.
I started working in schools, and create more awareness around um, sexual orientation and gender identity. And it has been great so far. And of course, now just started my own clinic in Delhi. So that's the whole focus is moved there. But of course, a lot of training. I think it's very important to share constantly whatever you have learned with the upcoming generation. And I see so many people want to be in this field, so many people wanting to make a
Yes,
difference, and they're more informed about the recent trends, and they talk more openly. So it's been lovely.
that's great. Before we move on, any one message that you have for the LGBTQ community on battling the stigma? Owing to your experience in working with them specifically, I'm sure you can have a nice message for them.
I think the most important is to know that your therapist is as human. I was recently writing this quote that we are as human as you are. We are as prone to making mistakes as anybody else. So, there's a therapist who's trying to be of help, who's trying to be positive. I think that acceptance needs to come from the clients as well. And therapy space for a client from the community is their space. They can talk about whatever they want to, about work, relationships, their appearance, their body image, and some people come to therapy to just know who they are and what they want, who they
Yes.
want to be, sexually engaged with, and what gender modality will feel congruent and affirming to them, and how they want to dress up. It's your life, and you get to decide, and you can't let anybody else decide that for you.
Thank you. That was really very eye-opening. With that, I think we can go ahead and take some time out for the questions. I
Sure.
do have some questions from the registration form that I'll just post in the chat window. And everyone
Sure.
else who are present here, I'd request you all to also put in your questions in the chat window so that you, Ruchika, can then take them up sequentially. So the first question we have is actually a bit generic. How to gain experience in a counseling setting when all internships are expensive. I think this is a widespread problem, at least in India.
Believe me, I was astonished a week back. I wouldn't want to name the organization, was charging 20,000, and we had actually promoted that organization because through the lockdown they had also provided free webinars and internships. But I do see how students are struggling. Back in my era or generation, the colleges would make sure we get the right kind of placement for internship. But see, it's both sided, Radhika. I feel clients are also becoming more aware. When I was studying in 2010, 12, in government setups, nobody asks the client that, would you want
Mm.
this person to be sitting? And we would be very, embarrassed of
Yeah.
sitting in that area
Mm.
where the doctor, the psychiatrist, or the psychologist is not even asking for the consent. And that became a major reason why when we started internship and I was working in my previous organization, we would tell them that there's no observership, because most of the clients are not ready. If I go for
Absolutely.
therapy and my therapist asks me, Ruchika, can another person sit here as a student who'll observe? And I wouldn't want that. It
Right.
doesn't matter if there's a curtain in front or there's no curtain in front. It just you're taking up somebody's private space by having people
Right.
sit in. I see organization have interns who come and who completely thrown in charge of these clients who are in daycare or who are there, which is not right. Because I remember the first time I went for my internship and I was given a client, I didn't even know what to do with that client,
Mm.
which is so I feel that observership in our field is very difficult, and that's the biggest challenge. And
Mm.
then a lot of organization only take theoretical classes, which means that students do not get the practical experience that they're hoping to get. But I think we
Right.
are put in a difficult situation because what do we promise you? We cannot hand over somebody's life crisis onto
Absolutely.
your, you know, little hands until you don't know. So it's a challenge in our field, and I don't know what are they charging for when they can't even provide that kind of observership.
Mhm.
What students can learn more is, sure, for their classes they need to do the internship hours for their course curriculum, which
Yeah.
means go to certain NGOs.
Mhm.
I can tell people here who are Delhi based that there's a very good NGO in Gurgaon called Earth Savior Foundation, which does have people who are
Yes.
destitute, who've been thrown out of their houses, who have mental health issues. Go speak to them, but do not expect that clients that we are seeing will let you sit in their sessions, or
Mhm.
we do discuss cases. I have interns who role play with me. I become the most difficult client and they need to
Yes.
use all their skills. We record sessions, we give them feedbacks about it, but most organizations can't promise that observership.
Mhm.
So you have to make the right kind of choice, that who am I going to? A lot of students are not aware that you cannot do clinical psychology internship under a counseling psychologist.
Yes.
You know, it is just that, okay, this place is cheaper, we pay here, we get our
Mhm.
internship hours. You rather get those internship hours in doing theory classes, and for practical, for your own training, go to these NGOs who wholeheartedly have you come in and help kids, help adults. You can have a conversation with them and help them out in whatever manner, rather than expecting that in a commercial setup you'll get to sit with the clients.
Right. I think that's wonderful advice. In fact, even we ourselves, having worked with psychologists in the past few months, have observed, and I mean, they used to have the same concerns that the observership is not there and internships are so expensive. And we also collectively came to this solution that working with NGOs is the best way, because not only are you getting to help people how to actually need help, you're also getting to learn in a practical setting, which is very important to progress in this path. um,
Absolutely.
this is the next question.
Like I said, one of the good places, like I would say, I would recommend their course is Mariwala Healthcare Initiative, that does a 6-day online course. I think the charges are around 12,000, and I know might be a little expensive for
Mhm.
especially students. But yes, you can wait for the time when you pick up a job, walk with children or walk with heterosexual community, gather some resources, and then do this course before you start seeing clients from the community.
Right.
So that's one of them, which I know.
Mhm. And I would just like to take a moment here, because we were discussing about working with NGOs. The boot camp that I initially talked about that we are launching, so it is going to be launched in May. And the aim with that boot camp was also that we provide psychologist training in CBT, REBT, with a specialization in depression and anxiety. And then for the practical experience, we've actually partnered with NGOs who have communities in dire need of support. And therein, after some basic learning in a very sequential manner, psychologists can actually connect to the people in those communities virtually and begin counseling with them, all under the guidance of the trainer. So as I said initially as well, the link is in the chat box. So if you wish to read up more about it, the link is here. You can register, and once you register, it's a really short form. We will share with you the application link and an info deck which will have all the information. Okay, so moving on to the next question. Pred, 1 second. I think it didn't get posted. Yeah.
All right, I think prejudices in the psychology community. Radhika, are we talking about the LGBTQIA community?
I am not sure actually, because I'm just posting questions as it is that we receive. But I think maybe they're asking in the community, in the sense that do psychologists have these prejudices and how is the situation there?
See, for sure, like I said, Radhika, in the beginning, that um, when you use LGBTQIA affirmative therapist in your in under your bio, we've had people who think that, initially when I'd started to work, think that we are the ones who are influencing, and if we as psychologists also start influencing this behavior according to them, the choices, then who are they going to take their kids to? And it has come with a lot of courage to be a therapist who affirms and who's a queer affirmative therapist. But I think the prejudice in all ways,
Right.
it's not just about from the therapist to the client, it's equally from the client to the therapist as well. But if you're talking
Absolutely.
about psychology community, I think there are prejudices against, I don't want to see a certain client from a certain religion.
Mm,
Um, you know, I don't want to see male clients. I don't want to see male clients with sexual dysfunction. I don't want to see geriatric clients. So everybody comes with their own set of belief systems that they've grown up with, and nobody is changing them just because we're psychologists. It doesn't magically change. It's a constant effort every day. During sessions also, there's a common thing that I teach, that one of the requisite it says to be a psychologist is to be non-judgmental. you know and how do we become non-judgmental? Nobody knows. It's only by experience, when you go back
right.
and ask yourself that, was I fair to the client today?
Mm,
Were my thoughts, was I present in the session? We have had clients who've come and said that, my wife made me so angry that I had to hit her.
mm,
And the immediate thing in my head is, oh my God, you're a bad person. But then you have to step back and ask yourself that, am I stereotyping most men in the same category? When I see another
yes.
client who says that I get angry, and the first thought that starts coming is, most men are abusive. So we have to constantly fight these, and sometimes it's going to happen after a session. But do go
Yeah.
back and introspect, that have we been, completely aware of our stances in the sessions? You know, am I holding any prejudice against a certain community or a certain race or a certain culture? And we need to make it culturally more normative. We need to make it culturally more um, accepting, because I've had clients also come and say that, Ruchika, you're an Indian and I'm looking for a client for a therapist from UK because they'll understand my culture better. No, I can understand your culture as well. And then there's another um, thing from clients which would affect a lot of therapists. And if they're therapists today in the webinar, they would completely agree, where you're not a married, you're an unmarried psychologist, and couples would say that you're not married, you'll not understand.
Yes.
And I would get so angry. And of course you can't express anger there, but then I started to answer that, are you telling me that you only would go to an oncologist who had had cancer,
Yes.
treated themselves, and then became an oncologist? No, right?
Mm,
Believe us, we can take care of your situation. So I think it's both ways, but as psychologists, it's, yes, we do have our own prejudices, and more than prejudices, I think there are certain beliefs we have grown up with, and we need to fight these
yeah.
beliefs first. So if you come from a family which says that homosexuality is a disorder, it's a choice, then you fight your family first. You fight your belief, you fight your
Mm,
family, not like fight, but yes, have a
yeah.
conversation around it before you start, you know, seeing clients who are from the community.
Wonderfully explained. Thank you. The next question is, yeah, what we have in the chat box as well. From,
Around the child abuse leading
yeah.
to LGBTQ. Common belief. A lot of people feel that, oh, he's gay because he was abused as a child, or he's bisexual or transgender because of certain situations. Let me tell you, child abuse, especially sexual abuse, contribute. to a lot of mental health issues, and um, but it's not fair to say that you are gay, lesbian, or anybody else from the community because you were sexually abused as a child. Because, like I said, because then you're again making sexual orientation look like a choice.
Yes.
And a lot of time I have clients who also feel that because I was abused by someone of the
Mm.
same or opposite sex would have created this, made me feel more comfortable with
Yes.
women because I was abused by a man,
Mm-hmm.
or because I was abused by a man, I've become gay. And that's a confusion, not just as any one of us, but it's also for somebody who is still exploring
Mm-hmm.
what gender, what sexual orientation they have. So it is a common myth, I would say.
Yes.
Sexual abuse can contribute to a lot of mental health issues, conditions, but it does not determine an individual's sexual orientation. The development of sexual orientation, believe me, is a complex process that begins before birth.
Yes,
And if
absolutely.
to answer in one line, no. Most LGBTQIA youth have not been sexually abused, and the ratio of them being sexually abused is as equal to people from the heterosexual community. I would rather say yes, women have more of sexual abuse
Mm-hmm.
history than men, but it's again not to say that men do not go through sexual
Absolutely.
abuse in their growing up period. In fact, I think to add on to it, Radhika, there are
Yeah.
also people who have these myths around how LGBTQIA youth are sexually, more promiscuous, or they exhibit
Yes.
more, or they are the ones who are more likely to sexually abuse children rather than
Mm.
heterosexual people. And I hear all of this, and I'm like, no, you know,
Mm.
um, in fact, there are a lot of research that also state that offenders who primarily abuse same-sex victims are people from who have heterosexual relationships. You know,
Right.
so these are, I think, common myths which we have to fight as much
Yeah.
as we would
And
fight.
in India as well, I think there's a lot of prejudice against the trans community as well, everywhere in the world, of course. But as you
Yeah.
rightly said, people tend to believe that they would be, potentially more abusive, which is, of course, not correct, as you rightly said. Okay, next question. Any suggestions? Yeah, I think you've covered this. The institute's name is Mariwala Institute. I'll just type it in the chat box.
What I'm gonna do is,
Okay, we have two more questions, but I'll just pick up one last question that we have in the registration form first. Helping teenagers to build healthy relations.
I think relationship is another of my favorite topic, Radhika. I've constantly
Mm.
engaged myself with conversations around relationship in terms of millennial dating, and how the age at which we would start exploring relationships has, of course, you know preceded now. People are
Yes.
more Kids are more open to having conversations about dating at
Mhm.
an earlier age. At our
Yes.
age, it used to be 18.
Mm-hmm.
Gradually, I start speaking children at the age of 15 talking about. Now I see kids as young as 10, 11 talking about having a girlfriend or a boyfriend. And that means that they have more exposure in terms
Yes.
of conversations around relationship, which is fine as long as kids are being made aware of what relationship entails, and all the aspects of relationship. I think for having communication around teenagers building healthy relation, it's very important to first let them understand their own self identity.
Right.
It's okay to explore. It's okay to not put yourself in any of these labels. It's okay to call yourself queer who's exploring. But the idea is to understand who you are as a person
Yes.
and understand your body. A lot of parents still don't want to have
Mm.
conversations around sex ed. You go to a school and tell them we have creative ways of talking to children about sex, and they are like, do not use these words,
Yeah.
or do a workshop where you're not using words like this, and suddenly you just have a biology class which will just explain everything. That doesn't happen. A lot of parents come and say, you talk to my child, and I'm like,
Yeah.
you talk to your child.
Mm.
Take your child out for a coffee. Do not just shut doors in your house. Take your child out for a coffee. Tell them that, I wanted and been meaning to
Mm.
have this conversation. Let's talk about things about your body, what you'll experience. Let your child know this is normal, you know. But
Mm.
again, it has to be made normal to these families, to parents first. You talk
Yeah.
about masturbation, everybody wants to run away,
In fact,
So
in
I
one of our earlier sessions we had was with Niyati Shah. So she's a sex educator, and these are some of the topics we covered. That parents need to be open first, and a lot of times parents came to her as well. That you tell our kids, and she said, "No, I will teach you." That, and then you tell your kids because children look up to you. So if you are not normalizing something, they will also learn that okay, this is something which we should hide or we should not talk openly about, and that ends up often leading to unhealthy relationships. So
yeah,
as you rightly said, that
yeah.
is a very important aspect of building relationships, and it should start as as early as possible.
I think rather than just sitting and judging the fact that kids are talking about sex and relationship at the age of 10, I think let's just start having those conversations at the age
Yes,
of 10.
they are anyway going to
And it's,
have it, so it's better that they are educated, and
yeah,
it's
yeah,
completely open to have them accepted. What would be worse is if they start hiding it and they have the wrong information from different sources.
absolutely. I think where kids are not taught about masturbation, that's the time where they are the most susceptible to abuse, because
Yes.
that's how, the culprits or whatever we could call them,
Mm-hmm.
that's where the views start, that I'll teach you. And then you're teaching a 11-year-old child things in very inappropriate ways, showing
Right.
pornographic stuff, teaching them all sort of things in the name of I'm teaching you about masturbation. You teach your child on your own so that they're not susceptible to these kind of abuses, right? So I think based on this and add on to it, once a child knows what it is about themselves and about their bodies, that's where you start having conversations about what relationship means. And it's a gradual process. You start slow, you interact with as many people, because there will be a time when you will choose one and you want to be with that one. But before that, when you explore a peer group, when you explore how you are interacting with the opposite gender, you want to know that what is it that makes you comfortable, rather
Right.
than just moving in from one relationship to another, just not relationship romantically, but otherwise also. I think communication
Yes.
skills is something that is very essential. How you talk to your parents, how you talk to your friends, because I think giving charge to people about what they speak can foster somebody's personality. The more we start
Absolutely.
talking about it, would help them understand what we need to say. What's a
Absolutely.
joke for you might not be a joke for somebody else. So constantly think that you would be, whatever you speak, it's going to be responsible in shaping somebody's life and making people more conscious of what they're speaking about.
I got one question in my chat box. I'll just post it.
Sure, I think we have a lot of
Yeah,
them
and we
here
can then
also.
cover them in order.
Yeah.
Yeah. So any suggestions for good institutes? Okay, this we've covered.
I think there's
Yeah.
one about to people who engage in open relationship come under LGBTQ community. See, one thing, and I'm glad, Manya, you asked this question. There's one difference that I want you all to know is that, like I said, there's sexual orientation is very different from sexual preference. Similarly, sexual orientation is very different from sexual behavior, and it's equally different from sexual attitude. So, having multiple partners, polyamory, monogamy is all your sexual attitude and sexual behavior. It doesn't change or define your sexual orientation. So, I can be a heterosexual. I'll put it in easier words. Let's say I am a girl and I get attracted to a girl. That's my sexual attraction. Now, I have a boyfriend and I have sexual intercourse with a boy, you know, but I would have preferred having sex with a girl. Now, where does it lead you? What kind of orientation do you want to give me? It's a simple question. Mania, if you'd like to answer. So I'll repeat it. I'm a girl. I'm attracted to girls. I prefer having sex with girls, but at the moment, I'm having sex with a boy. Where does it put me in the label of orientations? Anybody else can also try and answer. Okay. In case you're not answering because you're conscious of not answering, great. But in case you're not answering, right. In case you're not answering because you can't decide my orientation, I'm super happy. Medan, that's absolutely correct. It's my choice, and you want nobody to tell me which sexual orientation category I lie into. If I say I'm a lesbian, then I'm a lesbian. If I want to call myself bisexual, I can call myself bisexual. We are nobody to assign a orientation to somebody. Now, going back to the question here, um, sexual orientation doesn't change from time to time. Sexual behavior changes time to time. So, and that could be because of million reasons. So, what we need to understand is that my attitude towards having a sexual partner is that in a point of time, I want to have multiple partners. I can be as heterosexual, I could be a lesbian, I could be a bi, I could be a transgender. My sexual orientation would not define how many people I'm sexually active with. So that's my sexual behavior. I'm a lesbian. I am involved or I'm in a relationship with 5 women. That's my sexual behavior and my sexual preference and my sexual attitude. But my orientation remains the same.
There's one from Nidhi, I think, that we missed. Is it possible that we as professionals might not be comfortable taking up certain clients? And it is something not related to prejudice. It could be because it affects us for the sake of our own mental health.
Absolutely, Nidhi. Again, I feel that if you're not in a space to see certain set of clients, be absolutely open about it. And that's how it should be, because if you're not open about taking certain clients in a given point in your time, you would somewhere have unfair biases in your sessions. So, for example, if you're going through relationship crisis in your life and you're constantly seeing, um, you know, clients in a relationship conflict, then somewhere whatever you're feeling in your own personal life will get projected in your sessions. So you take supervision, do not take relationship clients at that moment. Come back to it once you have resolved your crisis. I've had clients I've had colleagues who have refused to take geriatric client because when they look at people from old age who have Alzheimer's or dementia, it reminds them of what their parents would also go through. And it is fair, you don't want to compromise
Absolutely.
your mental health because you want to cater to somebody else. And I think you'll do a very good job by transferring them to somebody else who can look at the situation in a more non-unbiased manner and more objectively, because you will attach a lot of subjectivity to these sessions. So it's just best to step back. And if you already know that certain section of clients don't work for you, it's absolutely okay to say that, if you feel that your temperament is something that you don't gel with children, it's okay to say that I only see adult clients. Or if you know that you're very, very good with children, but you don't feel a connect with adults, then you prefer to work with children. So it's absolutely okay. There's nothing wrong in saying no in any manner to any client. Even when you are in therapy with a client and you feel that you're not doing enough, or you feel that you're a counselor and the client needs a clinical psychologist, it's okay to transfer those cases.
So, one more question then. How would you help a client navigate through their sexual orientation and identity in an incredibly dysfunctional and heteronormative family environment?
The first thing I ask is that, are you comfortable with your sexual orientation? Let's work on your comfort levels, what your existing beliefs are. Because if you're grown up in this incredibly dysfunctional and heteronormative family, then you have a lot of guilt associated to your orientation. So first we'll work on your acceptance, we'll work on your belief about it, and your negative belief about it, and which will affect the way you come out and talk about yourself and your orientation. Once we've achieved that, then the second part is that, do you want to involve your family in the sessions here for me to have this discussion while you as well get a safe space? As a therapist and as a queer affirmative therapist, know that you are never in a space to push your client to come out. It's their journey and they get to decide when and how they want to come out to their family or to people around them. So don't pressurize any client to come out and talk about their orientation, or let them decide it for themselves. You're constantly with them. Tell them we are always there with you. Whenever you are ready, we will speak to your family. If you want, speak to them. If you want them to come here and I speak to them, I can do that. So, and of course, it's easier said than done in a case where it's incredibly dysfunctional. So, it will get a little more complex. It will take time, but I think first you need to work on your belief as a client, and as a therapist, you need to make sure that the time comes when we need to talk to the family about it. The client is very sure about their orientation and they don't dwindle on that, that out of fear, they say that no, I don't want this. So
Thank you. And I think one last question we have is that these are community problems, and how can we educate community?
I think when we talk about community, we're talking about the heteronormative community, the heterosexuals, or are we talking the LGBTQIA community? I Farhad, could you clarify that part?
Normative. Yeah, I think they mean
Hetero.
in terms of educating them.
I think, in case we're talking about how to educate the heterosexual community to be more convert into allies. When we use the word ally, that means that I am straight. I don't belong to the LGBTQIA community, but I completely support them. Then, yes, there has to be a lot of awareness and education around why we don't call being heterosexuals abnormal. And if you're not calling yourself or the heterosexual community abnormal, similarly, you cannot say that the homosexual community is not normal, even if you're not using the word abnormal. But I think it's more about building ally groups that work closely with the community and have conversations around how to bridge the gap and make conversations more smooth. Um, as a heterosexual uh, person or as a straight ally, I think it's very important to start having this conversation in your own heterosexual community. You know, talk more. You gain knowledge about what it is, have more conversations around it, how focus on the non discrimination policy, speak about abuse in general, relationship abuse, safer sex, talk about certain topics that are so hush hush, just not about the community, but there's so many other topics that people don't want to talk about. If you hear a person who is around you, as your friend, as your family, tell them gently that, do not use homophobic language. Do not, if there's a friend in your group who's staring at a transgender or who's staring at a cross dresser, you cannot, let them know that, okay, out of curiosity you want to, but it might make the other person uncomfortable. Don't do it. When you have these conversations with each other, I think somewhere you'll make certain amount of difference in your everyday life, how you're interacting with your peer who belong to the hetero community. you know Again, I think it's also very important to understand that not everybody is heterosexual. you know a lot of times I talk to people and I ask that, when you're asking somebody, oh, so do you have a girlfriend? No, use more gender neutral words. Do you have a partner?
Yes.
Or do you have a boyfriend? Do you have a girlfriend? You will never come to know just by looking at somebody, are they heterosexual or do they belong to the community. So this has to change, have more neutral terms. I've had clients who have said that, Ruchika, I've been to 5 other therapists, I didn't like them, and mostly out of curiosity we ask them, what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And so we asked them what didn't work with the previous therapist, not because we want to know um, if they were good or bad, but just, and I've had people who've said that I don't want to go to not just psychologist, Radhika, I think gynecologist.
Yes,
You know,
absolutely.
I don't want to go to a gynecologist who looks me up and down because I have,
Yeah.
signs of STDs,
Mhm.
you know, and they say that, oh, do you have a boyfriend? And
And
doctors use that
sometimes
term.
they would ask, are you married? Because they
Are
assume
you married?
that means if you're sexually active or not.
So I remember we have a curated list of non-judgmental gynecologists, list of general physicians who also deal with people who have HIV
Mm.
and who also belong to the community, because first of all, HIV is a big issue in India,
Right.
and then HIV for a person from the community becomes a bigger deal.
Yes.
So
So
when we're
is
talking,
this
I think going
list
back,
available somewhere that everyone can access?
I'll share it with you so
Definitely.
you can
I'll
put it
share it with
around.
everyone. Yeah. Thank you.
And like I said in the beginning, ask people what are their preferred pronoun. What is it that they would prefer to be called. Use more gender neutral words. um so yeah, these are a few things, and especially I think with lesbian gay, it's still easier in terms of not being picked up on, but people who identify as transgenders
Mm.
or even intersex,
Mm.
there's so much of gazing, looking, judging, because
Absolutely.
they look different. I think normalizing these stares, go online, look at pictures. I tell my students, what are you looking there? You're
Mm.
looking there because you haven't seen that enough, right? Go sit
Yes.
one day, sit and watch images of pride, or just watch whatever it comes. Just go on Google and type. intersex, you'll see a lot of pictures. Look at those people, normalize that looking,
Mm,
because constantly in metros, in restaurant, because then you know what, those people come to therapy and say that we are always stared on. I've
mm,
had transgender clients who say that, Ruchika, it's so difficult to travel in metro. I want to stand in the women compartment, and the moment I stand, the women who are,
mm.
staring at me make me so uncomfortable. And if I travel in the men compartment, I don't feel safe. And why they're not feeling safe is because of us,
Yes,
because
absolutely.
we want to stare, because, oh, we've seen something alien here. So I think it's very easy steps. I say it's very basic. Look, read, watch things. There are people who are curious to know how people from the community, when a woman is having sex with a woman, how is it? Watch it, watch and see what you like, what you're observing. If you have question, ask your client those questions then.
Mhm.
So yeah.
I think that's wonderful advice. I mean, a way to normalize it by yourself is to, expose yourself to more of it, see more of it, read about it, and that definitely works.
Right.
All right. So Fahad is also asking you if you have any workshops where, you take these courses or how they can get in touch with you.
I think they could reach out to me on my Instagram page. They can DM me. It's absolutely confidential. I'm the only one who uses and checks the DMs, so they can just write to me there.
I'll just add in the name as well. I'm not sure of the ID, but I think if you search by the name of your center,
Yeah,
yeah,
they'll
yeah,
have
you
me.
should be able to find it. All right, so it looks like we've covered everything. Is there anything else, Ruchika, that you wanted to cover before we wrap up?
I think mostly I have, but just to
Mm,
summarize, to being an affirmative therapist, there's a lot of, if I have to just briefly sum it up, I think first is your self reflection. Second is get involved, which means that become familiar with the issue, read the laws, strive for social justice, go for protests and marches so that you start feeling comfortable around them. Um, of course, we've covered the reading material and literature and resources. Um, but I think most important is be open about your commitment. What I have not covered here is that just because this is the need of the hour, I also want it just add it on my label that I'm also a queer affirmative therapist. It's very essential to know that you genuinely believe in it, and that's when you want to be that. Until you're not sure, you might end up doing more harm to a client than any
absolutely.
progress in therapy. So make sure your intention is your own growth and progress as well as the well-being of your client from the community. That's the most important.
Great. So thank you, Ruchika, and thank you, everyone. We appreciate you being here and hope we could make you more aware about the topic. Before we sign off, I'd love to have you visit our social media pages. And I will just post the link of our website, and you can go have a look there and visit our social media pages via there. And feel free to reach out to us via mail if you have any concerns or want to know more. We'd also be sharing a feedback form link with all of you where you can give us your feedback. And we shall see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. It's always lovely to talk about LGBTQIA community because I think the more we talk, the more we'll be aware, and I'm sure you all will share a part of this with your friends and peers. And of course, you can reach out to me directly to know more. And I could also share some of the resources I use when I'm training. I'll put it on my Instagram page just tomorrow so that everybody can you know,
Definitely.
gather information.
All right. Thank you so much, Ruchika. It was really nice talking with you. And thank you for a wonderful talk.
Thanks, Sandika, for having me here.
All right.